Misses, just a few centimeters short. The man growls and swings a fist at Izuku, and for all Izuku sees it coming, he can't dodge in time. The hit to his chest sends him stumbling back, and he barely has enough time to straighten back up before the man shoots a volley of 3 slick dark brown spines at him. Izuku feels a rush of burning pain as they sink into him, one in his right thigh, one in his left calf, and the third at the bottom of his stomach, just above his left hip. He recognizes that he drops to the ground from the way his viewpoint gets lower, but all he can register is the white-hot pain, and the feeling of his insides grating on the spine embedded in his stomach when he gasps for air. He can't feel either of his legs except for the blinding pain, but he does feel when the man kicks him right where the spine is lodged in his belly, knocking it deeper and making Izuku gag from pain, throwing up his mom's cooking and sour acid all over the dirty ground. He tries to pull himself away, crawling on the ground with his gloves soaked through with his own vomit and blood, but he doesn't get very far before his limbs stop responding to his requests. His hands grow weak, tingly, like they're falling asleep, and Izuku registers that he feels very, very cold. He tries to sit up, tries to do anything, but his body doesn't move except for a twitch. His vision is a swirling black, and he dry heaves, his stomach and throat spasming as he loses consciousness. He gasps for breath and stumbles mid-step when he comes back to himself, his body aching for just a moment from phantom pain. He stops in place, staring ahead of him blankly. He's out already, in his costume with his hair dyed and pulled back, and he just died. This street is familiar to him, only a block from where he now knows a villain is waiting with 4 civilians, and a quirk powerful enough to dispose Izuku, before he even got a hit in. The thing is, as much as he planned to die over and over again if he needed to save people, it's different when he's just gone and done it. He has to sit down, wrapping his arms around his knees and drawing in shaky breaths. He can't quite get his heart to settle because all he can think about is the sensation of the villain's quill sinking into his flesh, cutting through muscle and organs. He swallows thickly and tries to push down the bile that rises in the back of his throat. This is his power. This is his quirk. I have no right to be so upset by it. Izuku digs his fingers into his shins, feeling the pressure and the dull pain through his jeans. He focuses on it, lets it ground him. He feels his breath slow, feels his heart rate become steady, and only then he releases his grip on himself. He's still sitting on the ground, but he can think. He tilts his head back, looks up at the sky. The clouds drift lazily ahead, no urgency to them. He breathes, in and out. A single raindrop falls on his cheek, making his nose wrinkle and his eyes shut reflexively. Izuku pulls himself to his feet and swallows his fear, looking back toward where he knows the villain is. Porcupine, he decides to call him, because it's not like he's going to ask the guy for his actual name. Izuku knows now that he's not going to win if he approaches head-on, but he thinks he might be able to sneak up on the man, if he comes from the other side of the truck, where the headlights won't illuminate him quite so much. Maybe if he can get the jump on the guy, if he can knock him out before he has the chance to shoot spines, he'll be able to take Porcupine down before Porcupine disposes him. He knows what to listen for this time as he approaches the truck, sneaking around the back side of it so he can avoid being seen. He hears the thwack from Porcupine pins the man to the wall, then another series of thumps. He grits his teeth and prays that none of the people Porcupine has cornered are hurt as he skirts the back of the truck, looking up over the bed of it to see Porcupine's back. It occurs to him that maybe trying to sneak up behind a villain whose entire back is covered in weapons may not be the best idea. Izuku takes another step, and he sees the 4 civilians from last time, except the man Porcupine had pinned to the wall last time, has a trio of spines embedded in his throat, all clustered together in one terrible wound. Even from this distance, the amount of blood that spilled out from his body, coating his clothing and the ground below in a dark, sticky red, tells Izuku that he's dead. Izuku feels a wave of nausea pass over him, remembering the way it felt when the spines suck into his own flesh, when he grew cold and shaky and died. He swallows, heavy in his throat, because now he has to die, because he isn't going to let someone else die in his place. Their lives are worth more than his, after all, he has so many of them. Izuku pulls out his knife and swallows. Just because he has to do this doesn't mean it isn't going to hurt. He debates trying to sneak closer, first, but then Porcupine flexes and the spine shoots out, just barely grazing the cheek of one of the women. She shrieks and steps back, presses herself against the wall. She and her friends are all white-eyed and pale, huddled together and shaking. Izuku can't wait if it means they'll die. He's throwing his knife at Porcupine before he can let himself think about it, rushing forward at the villain before he can even see if the knife hit or not. He hears a squelching noise as it embeds itself in Porcupine's back, just between 2 spines, and Porcupine shouts in surprise, his back bristling up and the spine scratching Izuku's arms. He doesn't stop, though, tugging his punching knife out from his belt and burying it deep in Porcupine's shoulder. Some part of him, as he tugs the knife out of the wound, wants Porcupine to run so he doesn't have to die again, but he pushes down the thought. The stab wound uses red blood, and Izuku goes in for another stab, just as Porcupine's hand wraps itself around his neck, pulling him away from the villain's side, and moving him in front of Porcupine. Izuku struggles, kicking his feet out and feeling satisfaction when his heel knocks into Porcupine's stomach, but it doesn't seem to even faze the villain. Izuku watches the rage flicker in his eyes before he slams Izuku to the ground, his shoulder and head knocking against the concrete, smearing in someone's blood. Izuku isn't sure if it's the dead man's, Porcupine's, or his own. He pushes himself up off of the ground, his head spinning and the light from the truck headlights suddenly seeming brighter and multicolored. He reaches a hand up to his temple and feels a knot already forming, red hot and angry. Porcupine growls from above him and buries his foot in Izuku's stomach, sending Izuku back onto his side on the ground, gasping for breath. The air he breathes in tastes like rotting blood. Izuku shuts his eyes and curls in on himself, praying for Porcupine to just dispose him quickly this time, to stab him somewhere vital and get it over with. He feels another kick, this one to his shins where they're protecting his stomach, then a burst of pain so strong he can't tell where it came from. He's dead in seconds, but it still hurts like a wildfire raging through his veins. The next time he wakes up, he doesn't waste a moment. He starts running the second his eyes open, the concrete pounding under his feet as the city whizzing by. He has to find a hero, a real hero who can actually hecking save those people. He doesn't have enough power to do anything here, not to save the civilians or defeat the villain. All he can do is die, and that doesn't solve anything if it won't save people. He knows he saw Burnin earlier that night, but to his frustration, he can't remember when he saw her exactly where, and he turns down the wrong street over and over again, mistaking the warm lights of a nightclub and a bar, and then a street lamp for her fire. He feels his chest aching from the exertion, feels the muscles in his legs burn from running for so long, but it feels like nothing in comparison to being stabbed through. He finally catches her getting into a car, of all things, and he sees the look of surprise on her face when he rounds the corner, sweaty and exhausted and out of breath. Burning, he gasps. You need to come, he takes in a breath, sees her step out of the car and back onto the asphalt, a confused look on her face. There's a villain, Porcupine Quirk, 4 civilians. He can't get any more out of her, but it seems to be enough because she nods and starts walking, and he takes off running again, even though his lungs try to tell him not to. He hears her footsteps match his pace, sees the flickering light of her quirk illuminating the way as he runs, taking the shortest path to where he knows Porcupine is, but he knows from the sounds of 2 women screaming that he's too late, even before he can see the truck. They're round a corner, and Burning passes him up as he freezes in horror. The man is dead, just like last time, his blood coating the wall. One of the women, a college-aged girl with long blonde hair, is crumpled in a heap between the wall and the truck, her hair streaked with dark blood, and her arm pinned to the ground. There's at least 7 spines sticking out from her that Izuku can't see, and he realizes with horror that she had tried to get away. He covers his mouth with a hand to stifle any noise he makes and turns, running from the scene. He doesn't need to see if Burning wins to know that he has to start over. It's too late. He stumbles to the nearest building with an external fire escape, the metal stairs climbing up the 7 stories. There are lights on in some of the windows, but he doesn't want to wait to find a better option. He has no idea how long until this becomes permanent, until the blood of that man and that poor woman is on his hands. He climbs the stairs 2 at a time, his breath fogging his goggles where it leaks out from his mask. The view from the top is horrible. He can see the fire from where Burning is fighting, can hear the shouts and screams. He looks down and swallows. At least this way, he's dead before he can feel any kind of pain. He shuts his eyes and dives off, head first. Izuku notes that he isn't out of breath anymore when he opens his eyes, and he makes use of that fact, turning on his heels and sprinting. Burning isn't close enough, but that doesn't mean nobody is. There has to be someone close enough, right? There has to be a way for him to save them. Izuku spots a familiar convenience store, the lights inside spilling out through the glass doors and windows, the open signs flashing blue and green. He runs right up to the door and opens it, practically flinging himself inside. The heat of the air is too hot with all the adrenaline rushing through him, and the cashier, an older man with a bald head, looks terrified. Izuku realizes he probably looks a little like a villain. Call the cops, he says, pointing to the phone. 2 blocks north of here, a villain is holding people hostage. The man behind the counter nods quickly and all but rips the phone off the wall, dialing the emergency number into it. Izuku paces along the front of the counter as the man talks quietly into the receiver, too quietly for Izuku to hear. He sees an aisle of candy, an aisle of chips, an aisle of magazines. One has basic supplies like bottles of windshield washer fluid, duct tape, lighter fluid, and tool sets. Izuku sees the lighter fluid and the matches, thinks of Burning last time. The fire quirk is so well suited, too, he thinks. She wouldn't have to worry about his spikes acting as armor dot. The cashier's voice snaps Izuku out of his thoughts, and he turns to look at him. They said they'd send someone. They'll be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Izuku asks, staring at the man in horror. He doesn't know how long exactly it took Burning to get there last time, but it was certainly less than 20 minutes. He remembers the way